Hi, I'm Megan. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm here today to talk about my sewing plans for 2022. It's February and I realize we are well into 2022, but I still wanted to share my plans for the year ahead. I shared my thoughts on the year that we just left, 2021, in a previous video, so I'll make sure to include a link. And there I talk about all of the things that I made last year, some of my highlights, and I also recapped my Make 9 challenge. So today I'm going to be sharing how I am approaching the year 2022 when it comes to my sewing, some of the things I want to try, some of the things I want to stop doing, and just sort of my perspectives on the year ahead. The first thing I want to talk about is the Make 9 challenge. So I decided this year that I am not going to do a Make 9 challenge. It just didn't work for me last year. While I really like the idea of having a checklist of things to accomplish, for me, I'm not sure it's realistic to sit down in January or even December and think of, here are 9 patterns I want to make in the year ahead, because quite often I find that I am more ambitious with my plans than I am realistic with what I want to make. But also, the things I'm interested in making can really change throughout the year. So I confessed in my last video to being a bit of a squirrel when I'm presented with an exciting opportunity or some really pretty fabric or a fun new pattern. I want to work on it right away, and I tend to lose track of the things that were on my to make list, my Make 9 list. Last year I put 3 patterns on my list and I didn't make any of them. And that's not to say that I'm not excited about those patterns and I don't want to make them, but I just don't think it's reasonable for me right now, as I sit here in February, to think about what I want to do for the next 12 months, pick 9 patterns that I'm like, yeah, I have to be sure to make these, and know that I'll see it through. So I'm not going to set up myself for disappointment there, and I'm not going to do a Make 9. However, I have thought about some of the things that I want to tweak in how I approach my sewing practice, and also some of the things that I want to do. And so I had a comment on my video from looking back at 2021 that said, you know, what if I think about things instead of 9 patterns I want to make or 9 fabrics I want to use, but skills I want to learn, because that is an area where I did accomplish some of my Make 9 goals. And so I have thought about that. And one of the things that I want to do in my sewing in the year ahead is to learn something new or try something new every season. So I'm not going to set myself up to try something new every month and list it out for you now, but some of the things that I'm interested in trying are making a swimsuit. I'm interested in trying some new pattern designers. So I tend to sew the same pattern designs and the same pattern designers over and over. So I'm a really big fan of Love Notions patterns. I make a lot of their things. I test for Love Notions and Pattern Emporium, so I've tried lots of their patterns, but I'd like to try some new pattern design companies. So if you have any suggestions for ones you think I should try, please leave them down below. Some of the other things I'm interested in trying are some of the more advanced techniques with a cover stitch. So I'm interested in doing some, some more top stitching or some more of the interesting athletics wear techniques that you can use with the cover stitch. I am definitely interested in making some lingerie, so either a bra or a bralette or some underwear, that type of thing. So I think that there's lots. I've left myself wide open here for possibilities for what try something new seasonally could be. It might also be sewing with a fabric I haven't tried before, but I will try to post, at least quarterly, if not monthly, what the new thing that I'm trying is to keep you up to date. I've got my notes here, and I might refer back to them because I did make some points. But the next thing that I want to do is only sew what I am really excited to sew. So I do a lot of pattern testing, and quite often I am excited to try those new patterns. I like working with a deadline. I know that about myself. It's a really successful way for me to get projects done when I have an external deadline. And I have enjoyed it. Like, I think that the community aspect of pattern testing is one of my favorites, and I do enjoy it. But I found myself last year testing at every opportunity, and this year I'm going to be just a little bit more careful about what I sign up to test to make sure that I am really and truly excited about testing that pattern and making that pattern, and more importantly, wearing that garment. That leads me to my next not goal, but the next thing I want to work on, which is to clean out my closet. I think this is something that I've heard lots of people say, regardless of whether they're sewists or not, is to do that wardrobe cull. I often clean out my closet when I'm not in a great mood, or I'm dissatisfied with something. Quite often I'm dissatisfied with myself, and I'll clear out my closet and get rid of all the clothes that I don't like. And I take it out on my clothing for sure. And I haven't done that in about 3 years. And so my closet, when I went back to work after my last maternity leave, and my son is 3.5, so 2.5 years ago, I had cleared out my closet really thoroughly. I had like 2 pairs of pants, a couple dresses, and a few sweaters, and that was it. And now I have a closet that is overflowing with clothing. So I do need to do a cull. A lot of the things that I need to get rid of are handmade garments, which it feels like it sits a little bit heavier than, handing down clothes that I got at Old Navy or whatever. But I also know that they're not being worn in my closet, so I may as well let them out into the universe to find someone who does want to wear them, or recycle them, or refashion them, or whatever. So I do want to clear out my closet quite thoroughly and get rid of the things that I'm not wearing, the things that I don't like wearing, and to really take note of what it is that I have worn a lot of or often, and help inform, I like to sew garments that not only are things I'm going to wear every day, but are things that are really fun, things that excite me to sew, because that's not just, I'm not just in it for the clothes, though that is definitely one of the motivating factors. I'm in it for the process of sewing. Like, I actually like sewing. And so I'm not interested in quilting, but I can see how you would get there. And maybe someday future Megan will be like a passionate quilter, but I'm not right now. I still have room in my wardrobe for more clothing, and I want to make more room in my wardrobe for more clothing. So I'm going to embark on that. Something else I want to focus on this year is to use what I have. So I have tons of patterns that I have purchased that I haven't made. I also have a really robust fabric stash. And so I want to use up a lot of that fabric, because if in the future, in the next couple of years, we decide we want to move, I don't want to pack up all that fabric and move it. So I do want to sort of trim the stash and be a little bit more mindful of how much space I take up with my fabric. There's some stuff that I have tucked away that I am sure I forgot that I have, to be honest. I don't have like a Trello system for my fabric stash. It's just mostly folded and put away in cubbies and like within a wardrobe organizer in my closet. But definitely it's also tucked into like my pajama drawer or a bag that's in a box at the bottom of the closet. And there are things for sure that I bought that I was so excited to sew and have forgotten that I own. And that's not great. That's not a good use of resources for me or the fabric or, the planet. And I don't need to buy anything else unless I really, really want to. So this isn't going to become a no-buy channel, but I do want to use up what I have and focus on using the fabric that I was excited about when I bought to turn it into clothes. Something else I really want to do in 2022 is to keep better records. So I mentioned in my 2021 review video that I have no idea how many things I made last year. And I think that, keeping records is really important for me so that I can look back on the year and say like, oh yeah, I did make this many things. Look at all that I accomplished or achieved. But also, here are some things that I made, and if I make them again, how might I do it differently? What size did I make? What fabric did I use? How much fabric did I use throughout the year? Something else I'm tracking this year is how much money I spent. So I don't feel guilty about how much money I spend on sewing. It is my hobby. I try to be reasonable and stay within, the parameters of the income that I earn and how much disposable income I have. But I would like to set a better budget for how much I want to sew, because I think that's probably a good idea for me moving forward. And there are other things that I like spending money on, so I'm just going to set a budget. And to do that, I want to know how much money I'm already spending on fabric and patterns and supplies and that type of thing. So I'm going to keep more detailed records about how much money I spent on fabric, and I think that will also sort of give me a sense of, did I use those fabrics? Did I use those fabrics within the year? Did I use those fabrics within 2 years? Or do they just sit on the shelf to age like fine wine? So that's what I'm interested in knowing. I also think if people are interested in knowing that about others, so if that's something that you're interested in knowing about, I can't share at the end of the year how many garments I made, how much money I spent, that type of thing, if I don't know and I don't keep track. So that's definitely an area where I have already started tracking those things, and I've already kept logs for the year of what I've made and the sizes and the fabric that I've used. And knowing that I'm going to have to write down this is how much money I spent on this fabric has stopped me a few times. And I'm like, oh, I don't need that actually. I probably have something in my stash I could use to make that pattern if I really want to. Something that I really want to do this year is to take accurate measurements often. This one, I find myself learning this lesson over and over again. And one of my general life mottos is to always make new mistakes. And so when you make the same mistake over and over, which might be cutting the wrong size garment or, not making an adjustment that you probably needed to make, it can get really frustrating. So I don't necessarily feel like I have wasted a lot of fabric, but there are some garments that I think I could have improved the fit on if I had been more accurate with my measurements, or if I had taken measurements and realized that, oh yeah, no, my hip has gone up an inch. I probably should grade this pattern up that extra size, as opposed to thinking, no, I can fit within that lower size bracket. I just want to be happy with the garments that I make and how they fit on my body. And I want to separate that from how I feel about my body. So that's maybe challenging or maybe wishful thinking, I don't know. But at the end of the day, they are just numbers, and taking my measurements more regularly gives me a sense of sort of how my body is changing or not changing, and the size bands I'm going to be into. Because if I'm going to spend a few days making a pattern, I want it to fit, and I don't want to put it on at the end of the day and be disappointed by the fact that, oh yeah, I should have gone up or down a size bracket. In the same vein is this year I want to be less afraid of more complicated or more involved pattern adjustments. So as I progress with my sewing practice, I'm comfortable grading between sizes, not a problem. Recently I learned how to do a full bicep adjustment, has made a world of difference in how my sweaters and tops fit. I don't typically need a bust adjustment, but there may be a time when I do that. Last year I moved a dart, and I was so worried that I had done it wrong that I made 3 practice bodices to see if I had placed the dart correctly, and I spent way too much time thinking about it. So I want to be less afraid of making those pattern adjustments and fit adjustments to fit the garment to my body, not trying to fit my body to the garment. I did buy myself a copy of Jenny Rushmore's book, Ahead of the Curve, which is a fit guide for plus size figures or curvy figures, and I am going to work through this book. So I don't intend to sew every pattern in the book and follow it along, though I think that would be a really cool project. But there are a couple things that I want to try, including I want to try the pants and the shell, the bodice shell that's in here, and maybe the woven dress to see if I can identify some of those pattern adjustments that would make a difference when I'm sewing for my body. And I think that this will be really helpful. So, she's got great tutorials, and you can find tons of reviews of this book. I believe the first print run even sold out. So they come with the patterns, and I think that this would be a great resource, and what a great way to learn. For me, I learn by doing. I also learn by watching. So I might watch some of the fit classes that are on Craftsy. I have a Craftsy membership I forgot to cancel, so I ended up paying for it for the year, and it was more money than I wanted to pay for it. So I might as well watch some of those classes and see what I can learn. But yeah, I don't necessarily want to sew through this whole book, but I thought I could try some of the projects and see what I can learn about fitting my body, and that, there's also a ton of support available in the community right now for these projects, so I think that would be a worthwhile endeavor. Earlier I mentioned, trying to use what I have, and I have a ton of sewing books. So another book that I have is the one that Kenneth from Itch to Stitch wrote. This is so beautiful. And this one only comes in the patterns are sizes 0 to 20. And so for Itch to Stitch, I sew anywhere between, I have made a 14 or a 12 top to a 16 or 18 and up to a 24 on the hips. So I'm all over their size chart, honestly. And, but these are basic patterns, and I think that I'd like to try some of these too. So I haven't even opened the pattern pack on the back. And I think, Sewing what I have includes using some of the resources that I have. So I've got lots of sewing books. I have the first Tilly and the Buttons book. Haven't made any of the patterns from that book. I have a few other ones too that I think have great patterns in it. So if I'm looking for something, looking for some inspiration, I think I can look back at these. But again, only sewing what I want to sew, what I'm excited to sew, as opposed to, oh, I have to do this and I have to make these things because I bought the patterns and now I have to make it. Same with sewing basics. Like last year I sewed a ton of plain solid colored tank tops and t-shirts, and I did need them, but they're not very exciting to sew. And I do think there's a balance between knowing you want to sew, at least for me, knowing I want to sew for comfort, or I want an easy project, and that's what I'm getting out of it, is I want the satisfaction of having sat down at my machine and made something, versus I want the challenge that comes with a more advanced technique or a more involved project, or a fit project, that type of thing. So finding that balance will be important for me, I think. But one really only needs so many sweatshirts or so many tank tops, and it's just not as satisfying to bang out 5 or 6 of them as it is to make 1 or 2 and then move on to something else. And so I also need to remember that. There are a couple patterns that I think I want to try in the year ahead. I do want to try some trousers. So I want to try the Closet Core Patterns Pietra pants. It has been on my list for a long time, and I think instead of making instead of making the trousers in this book, which are a flat front elastic waist trouser, I might try the Pietra pants instead, or I might do both, but we'll see. I would like to try out that pattern, and I would still like to make the glissando pants or skirt, or another similar skirt pattern that has sort of those jean-like details before I actually embark into the possibility of making jeans. I mentioned earlier that I'm interested in learning how to make a swimsuit. Honestly, this is something I never thought I would sew until a couple weeks ago when I went to go buy a swimsuit, and it was such a negative experience to be in a fitting room and trying to find a swimsuit that fit when I'm used to making clothes that fit my measurements, and I usually am 2 sizes apart on top and bottom, and I like a one-piece swimsuit. I was like, oh, why don't you just make one, Megan? Like, it can't be that hard, and what are you afraid of? And so I would like to try that. So what I would like to know is, what is your favorite swimsuit pattern? Do you have a favorite one piece? Is there one that you have made and you thought this is a great, first swimwear piece or pattern? I would love to know your thoughts. Anyway, that's it for me today. Those are my plans for 2022. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, and I will see you again soon.